Today is a great day for the continent of Africa. Today is a great day that marks the historical inauguration of our African unity, the unity that the founding fathers of this continent fought for, the unity that we needed and that we need up to today. It is that unity that propelled us to become independent. It is that unity that gave us, the founding fathers, to unite 57 years ago to form what we call Organization of African Unity, that later on became African Union. Today in Africa, so many things have taken shape. It is unfortunate that today, this year, 25th May, the Africa Day, is being celebrated under the clouds of COVID-19. The continent of Africa has struggled since the formation of African unity 57 years ago. The founding fathers of this great organization, Kwame Nkrumah, Haile Selassie, Jomo Kenyatta, Nyerere, Ahmed Sekou Toure, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Milton Obote, Amir Cabral, Patrice Lumumba, Samora Machel, and others who came later on to take up the struggle, Robert Mugabe, Gaddafi, those who struggled to make sure that this continent liberates itself from the colonial yoke, takes its political stand on the world stage. Ahidjo of Cameroon. These were great men of this continent. But today in Africa, on a great day like this 25th, how many people recognize this day? Why has the African Union, our union, that took over from the Organization of African Unity, why has it become a diluted, eroded institution? If the founding fathers of this organization woke up from their graves today and came to Africa to see what is happening on the continent littered with conflicts, a continent littered with countries not speaking to each other, a continent disunited, a continent destroyed by external forces that have taken Africa hostage, that they have taken the African Union hostage, that have created us the suffering that we see in Central African Republic, the suffering we see in Cameroon, Amazonia, the suffering we see in South Sudan, the suffering we see in Mogadishu, the suffering we see in Libya today. What has happened to this continent? I would like anybody sensible in Africa today, including Dr. Muhammad Faki, to tell me, including President Ramaphosa, to tell me how we ended up getting two men in one country fighting over a country that is already dead. fellow Africans, those watching me, I don't hit lightly. I hit where it matters. When anybody touches Africa, I will not miss my words. Because this is where I was born. That is where I have the spirit of Nkrumah, of Sekutore, of Jomo Kenyatta, of Nyerere, to speak the truth. I have no regrets. I can perish. But the French have captured our organization. The French have bought this guy you see on the screen. He receives handouts from the French capital and looks the other way when Africa is bleeding. I'm giving you the real material now. How this man has destroyed us. How Faki from Chad, Jamena, the tall man from the Fulani kingdom of Jamena, has destroyed. That's why he has looked a blind eye on the Igbos and the Amazonians, because he doesn't want to disintegrate the state in Chad. But that is not a problem. We don't want states to disintegrate. But to help the people of Amazonia by bringing their motion to the African Union. Viewers, if you look at the problem that we have in Democratic Republic of Congo, it is the French. If you look at the problem that we have between Rwanda and Burundi, it is the French. If you look at the problem that we have between Uganda and Rwanda, it's the French. If you look at the problem that we have in Mogadishu today, and let me tell Kenya to understand me, it's the French. It has come. They have paid the bills for us to fight over the islands of oil. Viewers, let's give hope to our founding fathers. Let's give hope to the future generation. Let's be united as Africans. Together, we shall rise and shine again. Thank you.
A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is Diplomatic Clicks. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Of course, we're coming to you from Kenya's capital here in Nairobi. A beautiful day here. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in today. Our topic for the day is, has AU helped Africa to resolve the conflicts? And of course, if you're familiar with the happenings in this continent, a lot of countries are in turmoil as we speak right now. The likes of South Sudan, the likes of Central African Republic, the likes of Somalia, Nigeria, Sudan, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Burkina Faso, Eritrea, and so many others. But AU seems not to do so much to try to find a way to solve this problem. And we know that due to conflict, we've seen a lot of misplacement of people, and staggering statistics there that shows about 29 million Africans have been displaced from, forcibly displaced from their homes. So that is, those are figures that should worry all of us. But what is AU doing to effectively address this issue? And we know one of the key things that leads to this displacement is the conflicts and the wars that we see across the country. Last year, AU had a target, and that called it 2020 the year of silencing the guns. I don't know what they've been doing, because we can clearly see they've not been able to achieve that goal. So what next for AU, and what is AU doing trying to pacify these conflicts in this continent? So in the panel this morning, I'm joined by Mr. Maganza, all the way from Harare, Zimbabwe. Good morning.
Good morning, Miriam. Good morning, viewers. Thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you. Nice to see you today. Thank you so much for being with us. And we're also joined by Saxon Vina, still from Zimbabwe. Saxon, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Miriam? And how are you, viewers? And how are you, Africa and the world?
We're very well. Thank you so much, Saxon. It's nice to have you on the show too. And we're also joined by Abigail Mopambi from Zimbabwe as well. Abigail, good morning.
A very good morning to you, Miriam. A very good morning to you, viewers and colleagues on panel. Thank you for having me today.
Nice to have you, Abigail, and you look quite lovely there with the purple. I don't know if it's the color of the royals, I'm not sure, but you look quite lovely there this morning. Thank you so much. And from Kenya, we are joined by Musa Abdi Haji. Musa, a very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Miriam. Good morning to all the panelists on the show, and good morning. Thank you.
All right, very well. So as I had said there earlier, for the African Union, 2020 was supposed to be a landmark year. Its Silencing the Guns initiative was aimed at ending all wars, civil conflict, gender-based violence, violent conflict, and preventing genocide in the continent by 2020. So I want to hear your assessment from our panelists this morning. How do you think African Union has done in regards to that initiative that it had, that aim, that goal it had by last year? I'll start with you, Mr. Maganza. All right, Mr. Maganza, maybe you didn't hear me. I'll go to Saxon.
The African Union has failed to achieve its set goal. One African Union, the challenger, the one who plays the piper, plays the tune. That is the challenge that we have. An African Union is not run by Africans, because whoever is funding the African Union has got his own interest. I think if you look at the conflict that we have in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian president was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Look what is happening. There are no structures in place with the AU to resolve conflicts. It's more talking than action. And the AU has to be action oriented if it is to achieve the issue of sustaining peace in the continent. But it cannot do so as it is with other interests. It's serving the interests of the funders. And the funders, they know that once there are conflicts, they can have their way. Look at DRC. DRC has been having conflicts since the 1960s. We've been an African Union which has been in existence, but it has failed to solve the crisis. Look at the Great Lakes region. How many crises have we had? African Union is failing to achieve its set goals as it's not funded. It's not only funded from an African source, but it's funded from Westerners with their own interests. And once with their interests are affected, they cause chaos. And the ones in leadership of AU who won't be able to solve it because they have to impress their masters. I thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Saxon. The Silencing the Guns initiative 2020 there by African Union it was aimed at ending all wars, civil conflict, gender-based violence, violent conflicts, and preventing genocide in the continent by 2020. Mr. Maganza, how has AU performed on that?
Honestly, to be frank on this one, the IU is a thorn in the flesh. And I would vehemently say that the African Union has failed Africa and has failed to resolve any conflict. I would clearly say that the African Union is a toothless bulldog which just barks without any effect on its enemies. We find out that the meetings which they hold in the African Union, probably in Addis Ababa, they are mere talk shows. And probably I'll take it as a method for those participants to get just honoraria, and then they fly back to their countries. But no resolution is ever put into practice or is effective. They come up with resolutions, beautiful resolutions, but it is not effective. Why? As one of the panelists has said, Saxon Shina, that the cause of the conflict is what we need to know. But usually in Africa, the source or the cause of the conflict is the sponsor. Who sponsors the African Union? Those countries who sponsor the African Union, they've got vested interest in Africa. And so, which means if they fail to achieve the interest which they have in a particular country, they sow divisions and conflict. Imagine the expensive wars which are being carried out in Mozambique. The insurgents are heavily armed and well trained. Who trains them? Where? who provide the ammunition to those people. Because we can't imagine just a pocket of people who just jump on the streets and toy and do whatever demonstration they have. They can just get to the bush and get guns. That is absolutely impossible. There's somebody who sponsors, meaning to say those who sponsor those terrorists or those insurgents are the ones whom we go again, the African Union goes to again in search of aid to come and fight or control, solve that conflict. How can that person who created that conflict be in a position to help solve that, to stop that conflict, which he or she has caused? So that is the challenge which we have. So my opinion is that as long as we on the African continent are dependent on the West and the European Union, we will still find out that conflict shall be the order of the day. It should come to a point whereby all of us as Africans, we have got to move away from that dependency syndrome. I don't know when and I don't know how. That is a big challenge because we've said this again and again, but our leaders, unfortunately, it seems that our sentiments are falling in deaf ears. We have got to sponsor ourselves as the African Union. We have got to deal with any conflict which comes together as the African Union, not asking somebody from people from other countries to sponsor or to help fight our own, to solve our own problems. Let's be Africa, solve our own problems, and then that way we'll be able to make sure that we have the Africa which we want. You know, the 29 million, which is all over the world, instead of providing skills and developing our own Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makanzo. They're saying we have to be the ones, we must devise ways and find means to deal and solve our own conflicts here in the continent. Like you see right now in the Sahel region, a lot of insecurity is going on there. And if you see the number of foreign troops that have been, France has contributed largely, in other countries, their soldiers are there trying to quell and address the issue of insecurity. But we've seen that has only helped it to go much, higher. Nothing really has changed there. So you wonder, what is the purpose of these people there, their presence there? What exactly are they doing? Are they helping in stopping and addressing the insecurity, or they're part of the people who are causing this insecurity? So those are questions that sometimes we lack answers to. Abigail Mupambi, how would you say African Union has been able to perform in regards to this vision it had 2020 of silencing the guns, ensuring that civil conflicts have been stopped, ending all wars, ending all gender-based violence and violent conflicts, and preventing genocide in the continent by 2020? Quite an ambitious, vision the African Union, had. But how would you say they performed?
Thank you so very much, Miriam. The biggest question is that how African is the African Union at the moment? So the whole issue depends on the objective. Are we still on track? And definitely no. We have long lost focus. And of course, from all the submissions that I've heard just so far, I concur. The African Union was long hijacked. So we are left with the name African Union, a name that gives us so much energy, a name that we can actually feel like we are safe. African Union, as the name purports. But is it really saving us at the moment? It's a question of looking back on the objectives. Are we still on track? And definitely no. This is the question that we must be able to answer. We must be able to agree on the direction. Is our compass still taking us the right direction? Definitely no. The best way is to make a U-turn and begin to say, where is our destination? Do we really need to continue in this direction? And of course, the whole issue also goes back to the issue of the funding. The hand that fund controls everything. So I think the leadership is failing us on that one. We are failed on that one. We need to begin to talk the debate on saying the roadmap ahead. How do we identify ourselves with our vision as Africans? And this is the progressive debate that we may need to go forward, because currently we all agree, and I'm sure even our leaders, if they want to be very sincere on this one, they must be in the very same platform to agree that we are going nowhere with this direction at the moment. We can we come out of this situation? How can we come out of this mess? The African Union agenda is currently being totally hijacked by the funders, by the West. And of course, we know very well that there are reasons for the first colonization for Africa. They still have the very same colonial reasons. And this is what they are forwarding. This is why they're funding all these things. This is why they're funding chaos. Not even to talk about funding the AU. This is why they are funding conflict. And what are we doing about it as Africans? What are we doing about it as a leadership? And this is the biggest debate that we must be beginning to look at. The way forward. How do we come out of this quagmire? Because we know very well that our agenda, our direction, our compass is all failing us at the moment.
Very pertinent issues there. Abigail, thank you so much. Musa Abdi from Kenya, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Abigail there has said, forget about African Union and what it's doing or not doing. Can we start asking the question, how African is the African Union? And I asked initially the question about African Union had the agenda at 2020 on silencing the guns. And the initiative was aimed at ending all wars, civil conflicts, gender-based violence, violent conflicts, and preventing genocide in the continent by 2020. How would you rate the performance of African Union on that goal it gave itself? Was it too ambitious?
Thank you, Miriam. I think to respond to... thank you, Miriam. I think responding to that question, we need to be imperative at first place, Miriam. You know, the formation of African Union was mainly based on achieving the aspiration for this continent in economic, social, and political aspects of the Africans. The question I always ask myself when it comes to African Union, I don't see African Union as a genuine body for the continent, Miriam. I see African Union as simply reincarnation and the extension of neocolonialism agenda by the European and the Western-based countries, Miriam. I base my argument on the recent report of 2018, Miriam. The recent report of 2018 by International Crisis Group, put Africa at a level of unprecedented arms smuggling, Miriam. African countries have spent a daunting amount of $40.2 billion on arms importation. 18.2 billion are from sub-Saharan and 22 are from the northern countries. The main recipients of these arms and smugglings are Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria, Miriam. As far as we have issues of extremism in the Sahel region, as long as we have issues of violent extremism in the areas of Sahara, when I look at these arms issue, Miriam, I tend to see more of West, more of European, than more of African. Because what I tend to see, look at the war we are fighting. Go to Cameroon, the Anglophones and the Francophones. It's all about France and United Kingdom. Go to the 2011 NATO invasion of Libya, purely done by United States of America and France. Go to Senegal, the way they're battling with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. All these have been firmed up by, issues of assimilation and inequalities, Miriam. Yes, we might have a lot of problems in the continent, poverty, unemployment, climate change, corruption, but conflicts top the list, Miriam. And we cannot see an Africa which is peaceful when the very leaders purporting to lead this African Union are not at peace themselves. Look at the leaders we have, Miriam. African Union is entertaining Yoweri Museveni. African Union was entertaining Yahya Jammeh until ECOWAS said, we cannot wait for AU, we need to go in. African Union, under the flagship of OAU, Miriam, was entertaining Siad Barre of Somalia. Until now, under the AU flagship, they decided to use now the AMISOM structure. As we are now speaking, African Union is entertaining the conflict in Tigray region in Ethiopia, Miriam. As we are seeing a lot of entertainment, we are seeing a lot of as Magadza has put it, a lot of, it's more of a toothless bulldog, I wish African Union 11 could not shout, but now it is shouting with toothless bulldog, it can't make any progress. They are making over-ambitious agenda. You've seen the African Union agenda of 2063, Miriam. When you see that protocol and document, it's over-ambitious. Mm-hmm. We don't know where we fall. It has taken us more than a decade to finalize the recent AfTA treaty, the African Free Trade Agreement, which took a lot of neocolonialism negotiations and, influence. And where do we go? They speak of future generation, Miriam. Don't speak of future generation. The future generation is already here. So where are we going after this? We don't have leaders with ideology leading the flagship of the union now. Mm. We have more of a ceremonial chairmanship whereby it is all about who sires with who surprises and excites one another. And I see Africa not at peace with itself, Miriam. Mm-hmm. I see Africa more disintegrated into neocolonialism extension, whereby if I see Britain if I see Kenya and Uganda speaking, it's as if Britain is speaking. When I see Senegal speaking, it's as if France is speaking. When I see these Arab countries speaking, it's as if then I'm seeing the influence of Iran, the influence of Ayatollah Khomeini, the influence of UAE, United Arab Emirates, the influence of Saudi Arabia, under the King Mohammed bin Salman. We have never been independent right from the onset, Miriam. Mm-hmm. And let me admit, we've seen other regional and continental organizations succeeding. And I finish by saying that the other day we saw the Asian giants coming from nowhere, leading the world. Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand. Miriam, these are countries, Hong Kong, which came from nowhere. They formed the Asian States of Economic Alliance units, the Asiatic units, whereby they decided to reincarnate themselves economically. They were led by the likes of Lee Kuan Yew. They were led by the likes of President Suharto, who are mainly economically, Miriam. But come to the Africa, the third continent of Africa. We tend to, showcase a lot of things here and there. Tourism, we are good in financial investments. But Africa, Miriam, has decided to become the hub for terrorism now. We have Boko Haram, we have Al-Shabaab, we have ISIS, we have the xenophobic group in South Africa, we have the Cameroonians fighting over whether they should be Anglophone or Francophone. So I don't see African Union being the better way to resolve our conflict as a continent. But I have a lot of hopes in these regional organizations, Miriam. Look at what ECOWAS has done for Yahya Jammeh when he decided to stay in power. They said enough is enough, and they intervened, and Yahya Jammeh was chased away, Miriam. And I believe the same can be done with other regional organizations. Okay. I know COMESA is dead. I know SADC is a bit struggling, no matter how rich it is. I know East African Community is an upcoming baby, but I see African Union as something which is more of being ambitious, Miriam.
All right, thank you so much. And I heard you there commend COMESA and how they've, not COMESA, but ECOWAS, how they dealt with the Yahya Jammeh there. But right now we do have a crisis in Nigeria. Children cannot even play in the field. They've been abducted right, left, and center. And I've not heard ECOWAS come very strongly about President Buhari's handling of Boko Haram that now has become a mayhem and a nightmare to the rest of the region there. So I don't think ECOWAS is doing enough in terms of addressing some of those issues. But they're quite picky on what they want to address over there. But, at some cases, they try to do their best there. Thank you so much. Jevan Karanja, how would you rate African Union's initiative of Vision 2020, that was last year, of silencing the guns? Have they been able to achieve that? Jevan? All right. So Jevan is not there. So I guess we'll just, since everybody else has answered that question, we'll just go on with the show as we wait for Jevan to join and tell us. Right, he's not there. So there's something you've brought up about the sponsors of African Union, and the sponsors of African Union. There seems to be the people who are setting up the agenda, and a lot of times there seems to be the people who are also caught up in some of these conflicts that happen here in the continent. So where does that leave the common person in this continent, Mr. Maganza?
The scramble for Africa. We learned about it long ago, that there was a scramble for Africa. The scramble for the resources which are bestowed between the barrier of the African earth are what the West and the European community is interested in. So in order for them to be able to get their hands on that wealth, they have got to create anarchy. They have got to create despondency. They have got to create conflict in those countries which they have got an interest in. And then once they create conflict, there will be probably sporadic fighting. Let's take, for example, the Cabo Delgado issue in Mozambique. The area they are dealing with, the area which has been covered by the insurgents, is rich in natural gas. Meaning to say, by the time the fighting is going on, there is a port there. Obviously, the gas is being expropriated, being taken away, and then taken to those sponsors of the conflict. By the time they will have taken enough of what they feel is enough, they just leave the insurgents armed, and then the war will never end. They will only stop probably if they feel they don't get ammunition. And then if another funder brings ammunition and then sponsors them again, the war will continue unabated. So meaning to say that what makes us sit on our hands? I remember one other discussion we had on this platform with Ambassador Maina when he talked about the funding of the African Union, that most African countries are not contributing towards the African Union. Most of the funds which the African Union is using is coming from Western and European sponsors. So with meaning to say, as Saxon said, the one who plays the piper is the one who enjoys the music. And so which means that is the same applies to those guys who are sponsoring this conflict. And so as long as Africa is not independent economically, it means we shall always remain at the mercy of the so-called Western and European sponsors. That is the challenge which we have. And so which means we have to move out. Our leaders have to move out. And so this dependence syndrome, it starts at national level. You find a country now and again. For example, we used to talk about the sanctions, that the countries put up under sanctions. But why can't we ignore the sanctions and be independent? Not rely on those countries which are imposing sanctions on us. That is the same applies. Those countries, because they know that with the benefit, they provide us with the resources. So they know that Africans are after money. They're not worried about any other activities. They'll say that people fight and kill each other. It doesn't matter. As long as people are self-enriching themselves. That is the challenge which we are having in Africa. Our leaders are greedy, people are greedy, all they need is money, and then at the expense of the lives of the people, at the expense of development, Africa is going to arise. There should be a new Africa which is going to be independent and rely on itself and solve this conflict. God will never be silenced as long as we are not economically independent.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Maganza. Economic independence, greed, corruption, of course, that is a lot of times at play when it comes to, even at the African Union itself. We saw even during the elections then how things have been, and a couple of, information that we've seen come from the African Union leadership itself. A lot of corruption led there by the current AU chairperson, Mr. Musa Mohammed Faki, who ran again and was re-elected and opposed there. And if you know some dossier that came out a couple of, I think last year, the staff there, the African Union, give out some very scathing and very worrying reports about the happenings there in the African Union. So that how we allowed this person to go back again after all those very downing allegations, I do not understand. But he's there, ran and opposed. All right, so but one of the key things there, I think Abigail, I don't know if it's Abigail, no, it's you, Mr. Maganza, who said that we have to deal with our own conflict as Saxons, Vima. dealing with our own conflicts here in the continent, sometimes we don't have the financial muscle to deal with certain conflicts here in the continent, or just finding some of the solutions, or we have made to believe that we are unable to do that. But how can we possibly start dealing with our own conflicts so that we're not able to invite unnecessary foreign interference in this continent that end up even messing up the independence of African Union?
What we need to do first and foremost as Africans is start believing in ourselves, sitting down, setting up institutes that are wholly African funded to resolve conflicts, and maybe involve the people involved. The parties, bringing them to the table, telling them we've got an Africa to build. We are on our own. If you cannot build our continent, we won't go anywhere. I'm saying the African Union has been not even solving a problem of Sahrawi, which is an African issue. We had recently the United States saying they are recognizing the Morocco's ownership of Sahrawi Arab Democratic. What did the AU say? They kept numb because they know that's what the money is. The African Union, the African nations should start contributing towards the African Union, coming up with a homegrown conflict resolution. It's possible, it can be done. But the challenge that we are donor dependent. Whenever with any challenge, we look up to the West. We still have that slave mentality where we depend upon our former colonialists. But these guys, they've got their own interests. They've got their own agenda to pursue. They don't like us. If they colonized us in 1885, and we had to fight protracted liberation wars, how can they support our development? We need just to come back to our senses, and as Africans come up with homegrown solutions and solve our conflicts as Africans, and deal with our hotspots, be it governing issues, be it economic crisis, deal with them, address concerns of our people. I think if we start listening to our people, we can make it.
All right.
But it's possible. We can do it.
We can do it. You have full confidence in the ability that we have as a continent. All right, thank you so much. So as I mentioned there earlier, we do have some active conflicts that are ongoing in this continent, and some level of insecurity in South Sudan, in Somalia, in Nigeria, Sudan, Ethiopia, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Burkina Faso, Eritrea. First of all, can we just talk about Nigeria before we even bring in another country? We've seen the worrying trends there of children being kidnapped from schools, and we've seen a lot of that happen. And I don't know why the rest of the continent is not agitated. I don't know why we've become very used to such stories that it's not worrying us. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on what is going on there in Nigeria, and why African Union has not come out strongly to even bring to account President Buhari, because he's failing the country by not offering the security, addressing the issues of security there the way he should. I'd like to know your thoughts on that, Abigail.
Thank you so very much, Miriam. I think there is an era where we see that individuals, leaders, will become at some point bigger than the body. When an institution is bigger than the citizenry, and this is the era that we are having, and I think we need civic engagement, civic movements, which can begin to take steps into engaging these leaders. We need something that is action centered to begin to bring these issues with these leaders, because I think there is a gap between these leaders and the citizenry, the common man who is affected. You're talking of Nigeria, we are talking of Zimbabwe, we are talking of what's happening in Mozambique, and these leaders are also on these continuous talk shows. I think we'll begin to regroup also. We want to begin to find ourselves as a citizen movement that are able to confront these leaders, to begin to bring them closer to these issues, so that we don't continue in some well 2 miles apart, the affected and the very same leaders. I think, like we have been saying, we've been repeating this, the leadership has failed us at this point. But what are we also doing as the citizenry, the citizen powers, people to people across Africa, having seen this problem? Are we able also to group in a constructive manner and begin to bring these leaders to answer on such issues? And I think this is where we'll be lacking as a citizenry. Like I said, as I was starting responding to this, we can't afford to have probably leaders who are way bigger than the citizen institution which they represent. And I think these are issues that we must begin to also look at deeper, because the leaders account to the people, they account to the one continent of Africa. Why should they continue probably to be silent on the issues that we have tasked them to tackle? So these are kind of operations, kind of actions that we must begin to zero in and say, how do we move forward as a citizenry, as the affected, as the people of Africa? Yes, we have a problem we have identified. We now know very well that this is the scenario that we are having, but we have these leaders at the apex, but we are the only better people positioned to bring them to account, to bring them to an understanding of what we are going through, so that we begin to talk about the solution matrix going forward. Thank you, Miriam.
A very good question there you've posed, Abigail Amupambi. Thank you so much. Musa, Abigail is asking, all right, we'll sit here and we can complain all we want about the leadership, then the African Union, the kind of people we put up there, the kind of leaders generally we elect in this continent. But at the end of the day, have we become complacent? What are we doing on our part as the citizenry of this continent to ensure that we hold even institutions like African Union to account? What can we do?
I know, Miriam, the question there is very eminent on us. What are we doing to achieve the shared aspiration towards that united, economically stable, socially cohesive Africa? I know, looking back at history, Miriam, we have a lot of problems ourselves as the people. You can't rule out the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. You can't rule out the ethnic bigotry in Kenya, Miriam, with our neighbors. You can't rule out the issue of Arabs, ratio and class race issue in sub-Saharan Africans. All these are issues we are battling as Africans. Without forgetting, Miriam, the tendency of us being blind on voting all the time, voting on people based on their ethnic, dominance and sort of the stuff. It is something which cuts across all of us as African people. You've asked what can be done. And it's very simple, Miriam. Though complex, we need to start this initiative, as I've said it even earlier, of what I will call emancipation from mental slavery, Miriam. Until that time, we start to believe that African problems can be solved by African solution. Until that time, Miriam, we believe that the president of Angola, former president João dos Santos, believes that a hospital in Luanda can treat him of his illnesses than a hospital in Madrid. Until we believe that we ourselves, the WhatsApp application produced by our African brother in Ghana, can work even much flexible and much better than the bigger WhatsApp in the USA, I think we are going nowhere if we are not believing with the initiatives we are starting ourselves, Miriam. The other day I mentioned of how deluded African youths when it comes to the culture and the sports issues of the West, Miriam. We don't know our elders, we don't know our leaders, leave alone leaders. Some of them are not even entitled to be mentioned, but we are forgetting the very nemesis of the culture bounding us as Africans, Miriam. Today, ask an African child from Kenya to speak a Kiswahili in Nairobi, they don't know. You ask an African child in Nairobi who's Samora Machel, they will tell you he's an animal. They know nothing about the very nemesis African continent was built on, Miriam. You ask them today who is Eduardo Mondlane, you ask them today who is Thomas Sankara, they know nothing, Miriam. But ask them who won in the United States of America election 2020, they will tell you numbers by numbers on the states which has won, on the states which have voted and not voted, Miriam. Mm-hmm. That's the saddening part of our continent, Miriam. We've left our culture. Go and ask even a normal Ugandan what it means to be from the Kabaka Kingdom. Go to the western of the Mandinka people, Mandinka Empire. Go and ask people of the Shona and the Bele Empire. This is the millennials we are living in, Miriam. We know nothing of our past. We have been deluded to a level of accepting the normality of the West and the normality of our our colonial masters to be normal, and what is up to us to be abnormal, Miriam. Mm-hmm. So I believe emancipation from mental slavery is the one way to go. Number two, Miriam, Africa has been made and we've been termed as a nation of third world countries, global south, dilapidated, home of poverty, home of despondency and political instability, Miriam. That is how United Nations, that is how European Union defines us. That's how United States of America defines us. But we are far much better than that, Miriam. I see countries like Botswana and Rwanda, which is far better than some countries in Europe, like Bulgaria and Croatia, Miriam. But now the world has been made to believe that Africa is the home of the problems of everything. We've been made to believe that by getting a scholarship to Oxford and Harvard, rather than Pretoria University and Fort Hare University in Zimbabwe, then we can go nowhere, Miriam. Mental emancipation is key here, Miriam. Mm-hmm. And what I see every day being repeated in the books, third world countries, global south, characteristic poverty. Miriam, I can tell you there are some countries which have removed themselves from poverty, like Rwanda. Yeah, there are some democratic and human rights issues, but Rwanda is a middle-income country. We should be speaking of success stories, Miriam. Zimbabwe has been made by the Western world to be more of a dead and failed government, while we know the role Mugabe played for Miriam as long as Pan-Africanism is concerned. Mm-hmm. We've been made to believe, even at some extent, Muammar Gaddafi was evil. We've been made to believe that our leaders are our enemy, yes, a good number of them, and yet the saviors are from the outside of this continent, Miriam. Okay. So all these things need to start with us. Okay. I think until we reach that time that Africa, we are united by our creed, we are united by our blood, we are united by the struggle of the independence we came through, then we are going nowhere, Miriam. And to make my final submission, I would like to pass a message. The world is growing. Globalization is taking everything at a speed. The world is becoming borderless. I can talk to Abigail all the way from Zimbabwe or Mozambique. I can talk to Mangaza all the way from another part of the southern part of Africa. The world is becoming, the sovereignty issue of blocking Africans interacting with one another is coming to an end, Miriam. I can sit here and know the atrocities being done by Muhammadu Buhari and Boko Haram right away. Let us use information. Let us share. Let us emancipate our political ideologies, not as the one enriching these leaders in power, Miriam, but let us believe even normal Africans whose father never fought in independence can lead this continent, Miriam. Mm-hmm. And that is my humble submission.
Very well. Thank you so much, Musa Abdi Haji from Kenya here. Now a call to action, and we've seen a lot of course, foreign interference when it comes to African Union, a body that is supposed to be representing our aspirations, our dreams, and trying to just address the things that affect us here in the continent. And from what I've heard this morning is that African Union has really failed miserably in doing that. Even its own initiative there, the vision it had, silencing the guns 2020. I don't know if they've released a report to tell us how far they've been able to achieve that very ambitious dream. But from what we see happening in the continent, obviously, we still have a lot of guns going around. We still have people being killed. We still have women being raped. We still have like another report that was really disturbing. I think we were talking about it here the other day. A report by the Human Rights Watch in Cameroon said that the Cameroonian army, has been raping women in the Anglophone region there in Cameroon. And I just find that to be very disturbing. So these are things that are happening under the watch of the African Union. And a lot of time it has been very reluctant in addressing some of these issues. So one of the key things perhaps, because when it comes to a place like Cameroon, it's quite, we see a lot of neo-colonial struggles, powers there at work, and a lot of other African countries, and from what we see now happening. And so one of the key things is because the leaders we have at the African Union, they are thought to be gatekeepers. They do not have our interest at heart. They do have the interest of other foreign powers at heart. That is because these people fund the existing of African Union. It's very shameful to sit here and think that a body that represents a whole continent, we can't even afford to fund it, to fund its activities there. Other people outside of the continent has to do that for us. So can we, to avoid that interference, can we perhaps call on our leaders to make a deliberate effort trying to see how we can reclaim the African Union by funding majority of its activities? Can that help salvage the situation in African Union, Mr. Maganza?
Definitely, it's quite possible. I would like to take you back a little bit. Recently, we read about a foreign ambassador who was shot and killed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then the world was quick, including Africa, to condemn the barbaric act. And then he was in the company of the French forces, as you, Miriam, said before. And then the French are foreign in Africa. Where were the DRC forces? And the DRC conflict has been there. So my opinion, or my humble opinion, is that each African country has got an army which is well armed. I remember before we once talked, or our countries talked about an African force. Where is the African force now? For a beginning, each country should contribute a certain number, mostly where there is a military conflict, a certain number of each personnel to the African force. And they are also, the leaders are taught on peacekeeping. When we talk of peacekeeping duties, what it means to deal with the communities who are there, so that we do away with the issue whereby there will be abuse of the citizens who are also being abused by the insurgents. So my humble opinion is that if we have that African force, which will be put in place over a short period of time, that is very possible, because every army, every country has got an active army. The soldiers are put together, and then they go there, deal with the insurgents once and for all. As a continent, each country will pay its own soldiers. Will pay for the welfare of the soldiers while they get there to do African duty, for the international duty, because we'll not be having the money, rather than for us waiting for the United States to pay us United States dollars, so that we get the soldiers getting an extra stipend for being on extra duty. By the time we'll be through with those conflicts, obviously the African pocket will also be growing, and then the African Union will be able to pay the stipends to the soldiers who will be taken in to go and quell conflicts. So Africa can do it. We have got the personnel, but we don't have the willpower. So the willpower is what is needed. Once we have the willpower, definitely we are going to succeed. We are going to quell. In Nigeria, it's very disheartening. Innocent school girls and boys being taken, innocent girls. I remember the Chibok girls, when they came back, some of them were already mothers, whereby they go to school in the quest for education. But unfortunately, the education which they hoped to get is not what they got, but they were faced by the bullets and the gun, which was quite unfortunate. That is not what we like. The Nigerian conflict is very easy. The way Africa is there, and Nigeria's got a very large army. But what makes them fail to deal with the Boko Haram? Why don't they have the other African countries intervene? Send in the forces, as I said before, and then help quell that one. It is a matter of days. The Boko Haram will have vanished from the forests of Nigeria. Let's work together as Africa. Let's not make it simple rhetoric without putting plan into action. That's my humble submission.
Very well. I hear you, Mr. Vaganza. I hear you, and I'm quite as I share the same sentiments because I really don't understand. And so far, I've not seen African Union decisively coming out and addressing this issue that has been recurring. Specifically, you've mentioned there Nigeria, because I think it is something that should worry all of us. Because if our children cannot go to school and come back home safely anywhere in this continent, then we're all in trouble. We cannot sit pretty and assume that is just something that should be the problem of Nigerians. And what really shocks me is that a lot of those insecurity activities happen in the northern part of Nigeria, but the rest of Nigerians are just going on with their lives as if nothing really is happening there. I will be outraged, if I was there. I am outraged, and I'm way far off from Nigeria here in the East Africa, but still, I just don't understand how things there work. A Saxon. Funding of African Union by us, will that help solve the problem of perhaps ensuring that African Union is independent and is able to do what we want it to do as a continent?
That's the way to go. I think I've seen organizations that are not funded by foreigners. They achieve their objective. One of the colleagues spoke about even economic independence in the Asian tigers. They came up with their own solutions. And they're independent. They don't depend on the West. Once you depend on someone's funding, that person will tell you conditions. And that's why I'm saying why people are not acting on Nigeria. There are companies that are mining oil there. They might also be sponsoring this, the Boko Haram. And the people, at the end of the day, they cannot voice their concern. Well, they know this may be for Nigeria in case of terrorism. They know that because of religious differences, the Christian community in Nigeria, they will say, okay, this is a Muslim problem. The same applies to the Muslim. This is an African, a Christian problem. So as long as people are divided and not singing from the same hymn, we can't solve problems. Our leaders need to step there, come together, decide what they want, the way they want to take Africa. Because by relying on foreigners to solve our conflict, to fund the peacekeeping missions, we are simply surrendering our sovereignty to them. We're saying, no, you guys, you can control, you can run the show. We need to run the show on our own. Mm-hmm. Let's make each and every nation contribute towards Africa's standby brigade, which will be responsible for conflict resolution, sponsoring scholars. Because at times, some of these conflicts need to, people need to be conscientized. What are the implications of the conflict? Why should they resolve things amicably, not in a barbaric way, not going to war? Because if they go to war, the chance of them being killed are high, because no one is guaranteed of surviving in a military conflict. Mm-hmm. So I think there's also need to have a school of thought of sponsoring scholars to sponsor them to write articles to change the mindset of people that they're not used, that they should not be used. I think that can help.
All right. Thank you so much. Abigail, outside of perhaps funding African Union, what other ways can we ensure? Can we, one, make African Union accountable and call it into accountability? And two, how can we ensure its independence?
Thank you so very much. I will probably go back to the issue of funding. We have been talking of funding, but in my mind has been also worried to say, how much is this funding? How much is the funding? How much are we talking about? Because look here, we have many meetings we held outside the EU. It's about what does it take for a AU is a gathering where solutions and issues are probably forward there. How much are we talking about? Are we also being sincere around the issue of funding? And when we say we need Western funds to be able to run the African Union meetings, and in particular meetings and the gatherings, probably we are talking about the Western donors funding individual pockets. here, because when it comes to issue of funding a meeting, a gathering of heads of state, honestly, how many meetings have you been holding across Africa outside the buildings of EU? But we have been funding that as African. So I think probably we need to respect here and say who is really being funded by the West. We're talking about real funding directly with meetings, or we are talking about the backdoor funding that are making our leaders. Probably this is what is big elephant also in room. But coming to the issue of real funding for a surely Africa can do that, a nation can do that. But even country can actually, they can actually even rotate to fund meetings. So I don't think there is some sincerity in that one. We need going forward to zoom in and say, when we talk about the West funding, are we speaking to the real issues around the hosting of such meetings? Coming to issues of the issue of security, insecurity, coming in of the problem, assisting in other issues to deal surely we should be to deal with our conflict. We must be pushed by the zeal within us as Africans. We build back the issue of conflict in us and say, we Africans, we are each other's people. We must be able to second, like one colleague, and of course, I think Mr. Sonzina highlighted to say, we can be able to second our own security forces to deal with issues of conflict. We need the genuine buy-in, political will from our leaders to say, yes, we are able to do this. Yes, we can do this. Yes, we can do away with the colonizers, our former colonizers, backdoorly envelopes, etc. Need to go back and begin to respect these issues. Stay is the big elephant in the house, and take a step. One step matters from every African, from every African country, African as the individuals, and begin of us to have the right information into the ground. What does that mean to be? What is our responsibility as African? That should, of course, be the issue of mind capture, and the need to deal with that, so that we begin to believe in ourselves as Africans that yes, can do it together. I thank you.
Very well said. Abigail Mupambi there, a bit of a signal problem from her end, but I think her points are quite clear there. Thank you so much. Now, a report by the Africa Center for Strategic Study that was released on June 24th last year said that about 29 million Africans have forcibly been displaced from their homes. An additional, that was June last year. So if you go there and add the displacements you've seen from Ethiopia, the Tigray region, and from Sudan and from South Sudan that have continued, and from Nigeria by Boko Haram, and then you go down the Anglophones, because those conflicts have been active in Central African Republic there. We've seen a lot of displacements. And then you go to the DRC, the North Kivu province there. They've been continuous. So if you add all that and put it together, I think it's more than that. But by June last year, about 29 million Africans were forcibly displaced from their homes. And then an additional 4 million Africans were forced from their homes due to conflict and repressive governance in the past year, continuing an upward trend since 2011. And the top 10 countries of origin account for nearly 90% of all forcibly displaced people in the continent of Africa. So we've seen this has not stopped. South Sudan accounts for about 35%, Central African Republic 28%, Somalia 22%, Eritrea 16%, and DRC 7%. And that was a report by last year in June, so I'm sure this has changed, but that is according to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. So we've seen this has continued, and then you look at the silencing of guns 2020 by African Union, which we all agree really the guns have not been silenced. And so my question and the topic today was, has the AU helped Africa to resolve the conflicts? And I think there was a resounding no from everybody on the panel this morning, morning and this afternoon here in Nairobi. So what next? How do we move on as a continent, since AU is not meeting one of its key mandates here in the continent, failing even to meet its own vision and aspiration? So what do we do? What next? Way forward. I'll start with you, Musa, as we conclude. Musa, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Miriam. I think the way forward on this, Miriam, I think to my humble submission, we need, there is the aspect of generational interchange, Miriam. The generational interchange I'm speaking about is that what was very relevant in 70s and 80s is now deemed irrelevant in the year of millennials. What the aspiration which African Union was built on in 2001 should be different, and it is indeed different from what we are speaking in 2021, Miriam. The world is evolving. We are speaking about climate change. We are speaking about issues of, global action in countering violent extremism and terrorism, Miriam. But the African Union has been stuck in the very nemesis it has left itself since 2001, and even in the older Organization of African Unity, Miriam. We are not seeing African Union being flexible to the demands of the continent. All the time, the African Union is caught off guard, Miriam. You see the world of, something has happened in the Central African Republic, in Bangui there, nothing is happening. African Union will take more than 5 years to resource for funding, as Abigail has put it. It will take more than 3 years to contemplate on who shall be the chair of the committee or who shall be the head of the mission. We've had a lot of problems, Miriam. So African Union should just stop being overambitious in the name of AU Agenda 2063 and focus on the micro issues happening at African continent at a micro level, Miriam. What am I saying by this is that all the decisions made by African Union is purely political. Why can't we have non-conventional, purely bottom-up approach sense of decision making? This one can be approached, Miriam. The other day, when you look at the United Nations, even this one also is another toothless bulldog. You've seen the United Nations volunteers portal and how they share to the public the reforms they have made, the resolutions. At least they are trying to be open even in their finances, Miriam. But now when you come to African Union, we are dark. The other day they launched, African Union Youth Corps. I have applied for more than 3 times, Miriam, with all the credentials which have been put in place for me. They will tell you, we shall respond to you in 2 days' time. They will respond, never will they respond, Miriam. So how will a millennial think that such a continental body can be aspiration to represent what is happening to them? The other day, European Union, a continental body, decided to pass the European data law, Miriam, whereby you are not allowed to share secretive and private data of the European Union citizens without their country's consent and without their personal consent. They are protecting their data. Even you are seeing the other day, the WhatsApp group and some Facebook group, they are now telling you we have updated our privacy policy and sort of the stuff. We are in the age of artificial intelligence in the African continent. Are we protected from what our continent is consuming in terms of video content, in terms of audio content, in terms of even how we are transacting our stock exchange, Miriam? Let us go micro. African Union is really embodying to be another sort of United Nation, making itself so rigid and hard to understand. They should diversify. They should make it in a way that states which are battling conflicts should have a specific continental action plan. States which are now on the verge of becoming economically independent should be given another form of different action plan on economic recovery or economic advancement. States which have been divided on ethnic and political issues, such as Cameroon, should be given a whole lot of focus on itself, Miriam. Mm-hmm. We are not in dire need of professionals. Why do you have to? Yes, President Uhuru Kenyatta has his own virtues here, but I find it bad when he's electing the former vice president to be the one solving issues in South Sudan, and yet maybe I can have someone, professional diplomat, who is non-political, who can have a leverage of supporting a sovereignty backup of their country to go and work on that issue, Miriam. So my submission is African Union should rebrand itself, it should be flexible, and they should stop being overambitious, and for heaven's sake, they should diversify. They should portray the very embodiment of the African continent, Miriam. Mm-hmm. We've seen a lot of divergent issues whereby Egypt portrays itself more than an Arabic nation than an African country, the same to Tunisia, the same to Morocco and Libya. Mm-hmm. And here we are, sub-Saharan African countries also portraying themselves to be the natural African countries. So these are the issues we should be solving. African Union, they need to make a paradigm shift in this, Miriam. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for Morocco, you know them, it depends on, I think, which season you get them. One season they feel they're Africans and they want to join African Union. The next they feel, no, we're not even supposed to be part of this continent. So I think with them, it's very difficult to know where they stand. Thank you so much. Mr. Maganza, which way forward with the African Union? Now that you know it's not doing what it's supposed to do, now what for the rest of us?
I think we've got to get back to the rudiments. I'm of the opinion that we have got to make use of our regional bodies first before we get to the African Union, because African Union is the continental body. What role is our regional bodies playing in making sure that we resolve conflict? If our regional bodies are failing, and then which means it will be difficult for the African Union to also achieve on that one, because the regional bodies are the ones which make up the African Union. So my feeling is that let's look at SADC. SADC has got probably more than 10 countries which make up the Southern African Development Community. If there is a conflict, let's take, for example, the Mozambican one, which is there, and no action has been taken up until today. Meetings were held and nothing was done. So what role is SADC or taking place, is doing, what role is SADC doing in order to help alleviate the problem in Mozambique? Because it is already getting out of hand. We might hear reports that they've repulsed the insurgents, but we still hear the news that to those who will be on the ground that the fighting is going on, the insurgents are still in control of the places which they had taken over. And so it's bad news to SADC as a region. And so southern regions, regional bodies have got to make sure that they've got to put into place contingent measures which have got to be activated as soon as any conflict arises, so that they action it before it gets out of hand. Because once they will wait, that we'll hear from this and this, we'll hear from the IU, we'll hear from that and that. By the time they try to regroup, automatically that conflict will be out of the hand. Regional bodies should play their part. When there is need, that is when we come to the African Union. And then by the time the regional bodies will be trying to solve the conflict, which means the African Union should be in a position to be sourcing for resources, so that when need be, it should be ready to go and assist the regional bodies. And then by so doing, we will win.
All right. Very well. Thank you so much, Mr. Maganza. Saxon. Saxon, are you there? Very well.
I concur with what Mr. Maganza said. I think for Africa to start progressing AU, I think it has to start from a regional level, maybe because we're a continent almost 1.2 billion. The African Union is a grouping of 54 nations. The smaller groupings, if they are effective, I think that can help to cascade it, because at micro level, we might have SADC being able to solve its own problem, having its own agenda, which will marry with the African agenda. The same applies with the ECOWAS, the East African State Union. I think we need to have those small blocks that can start changing the approach. And I think if they do so, they get serious, having an African agenda, funding their own projects. I think it will be a starting point in this resolving conflicts, because conflicts happen in the region, and the regional countries, if they play a pivotal role in solving that conflict, it also cascades to the continent, because we cannot have Kenya solving a problem in Southern Africa. It's impossible. But Mozambique can, Zimbabwe can. So it's up to small regional groupings to start having an approach that is Afrocentric, which is African-centered, African-funded, and I think we can solve our conflicts. I submit.
All right, very well. Interesting you would say that, because the conflict there, the stalemate that was in South Sudan, remember when they had failed several times to meet the deadline of signing the peace deal, the revitalized peace deal, and finally they did last year. The vice president for South Africa is the one who mediated that, the process, and sort of they were able to agree. So inter-regional bodies, I think sometimes it works well, but I totally agree with what you're saying there. Thank you so much. Abigail, end it for us.
Thank you so very much. Maybe in conclusion, I agree with most of what my other colleagues are saying. I also believe that from this conversation, we are all agree that there is a hidden fact that is also fueling such conflicts. And of course, conflicts emanate from our own very own communities. I think taking advantage of media and the advocates around Africa, I think we also need to begin to have a serious and robust advocacy in our communities, at a national platforms, at a community level, where people are laid of such issues, because most of these conflicts we are not seeing visibly the Westerners in action. It is about brother turning against the brother, sister against the sister. So we want to have our communities which are very alert and of course conscious of these things. How far, to what extent, if we educated our own communities around these issues. So I think we also need a very, very prepared community. We want a community prepared citizens who are alert to these issues, and of course who begin to understand this whole dynamic. So I'm zeroing into that issues to zero down to community levels, because it is these communities that feed into national platforms and of course regional and African bodies. Thank you so very much.
All right, thank you so much. And before we go, Abigail, perhaps, I've learned that Zimbabwean Vice President, one of the Vice Presidents there, Kemba Mohadi, resigned yesterday following local media reports he had engaged in improper conduct. And in his resignation, he said, I have been going through a soul-searching pilgrimage and realized that I need the space to deal with my problem outside the governor's chair. I don't know, what are your comments on that before we end?
I'm probably, if you have been following the whole issue, I think he took a good decision. Resigning was a problem. To me, I see it as a way of respecting his office, and I do not take it as a cowardly decision. I am taking it that way, and of course, I wouldn't expect him to explain a lot of things. I think just to submit a resignation was enough in my context, and we respect that as Zimbabwean. And of course, we urge leaders across Africa to say, should you be found in such situations, whether you are involved, whether you are trapped, whether there are all these reasons, it's always proper to allow these offices to proceed, and of course your individual issues solved somehow and some way. I respect his decision. I think it was necessary, but I don't think it was worth it to explain a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. For the viewers who might not know what is really happening in that story, local media there in Zimbabwe has in the past 2 weeks carried out reports that Mohandi had improper sexual liaisons with married women, including one of his subordinates. The part that really I found to be very interesting is married women. I don't know if they were single, that if that at all would have made a difference, but anyway, that is a story for another day. Thank you so much, Abigail Mupambi. Thank you so much, Mr. Maganza. Thank you, Saxon Zwina. Thank you, Musa Abdi Haji from Kenya. And thank you, viewers, for watching. Let's meet here later at 3 p.m. East African time. I shall be bringing you the latest news from the continent. My name is Miriam Ogotu. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.